People talk about like there's three things you need for success: a mindset, skill set, and tool sets. And the concept is, well, skills and tools are your business and your training and your industry and whatever. Just have the right mindset. Well, how? I'm frankly drinking a ton. I'm working my ass off. My investments are all over the place. My marriage is falling apart. My health is not great. I kind of wake up one day and realize, wait, this is success? Like, what happened? I, like many entrepreneurs, believe the myth. Have a great idea, work really hard, scale your business, make a lot of money, then you'll be successful and free. And it's a beautiful myth, but it's a myth. I believe the most powerful journey, and really in many ways the only journey we're on, is learning about ourselves.
Hello and welcome to No Wrong Choices. I'm Larry Samuels. Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea will join in just a moment. This is part two of our conversation with entrepreneur Mark Rampolla, the founder of ZICO Coconut Water and now co-founder of Ground Force Capital. In this chapter, Mark shares the story of launching ZICO, building it into a successful brand, and eventually selling the company while continuing a journey of self-discovery that shapes how he approaches both business and life. Before we jump back in, please support the show by following or subscribing wherever you're listening. We'll pick things back up with Tushar as the conversation turns to the moment that set this next chapter in motion.
Were you with the paper company at this point?
Yeah. So I was there for, I had met my then wife, Maura, in grad school. She was at Chapel Hill, and we had met through some mutual friends. We moved to Memphis, Tennessee together. And so I was with International Paper in Memphis for about 2 years, where I traveled a ton. I was in Europe, Latin America, and Asia supporting the businesses. I worked for a great guy that kind of ran the division. So it was sort of a generalist, catch-all strategy type role. But it was great. I learned a ton and really loved it. And then an opportunity opened up in El Salvador. And once again, in a company of, I don't know, they must have had 200,000 employees at the time. There's probably, there's probably one person in the company that is excited, jumping up and down, but also speaks Spanish, has lived in the region, works in the division, has an MBA. So I got a chance to move to El Salvador. And so I moved with by then she was my wife, Maura, and ran a little business that was beverage packaging. So we made like gable top cartons for milk and juice companies in Central America. And I had 50 people. I was the general manager for that little business.
What did that experience teach you?
Oh man, that taught me, that teach me, I learned so much. That was 5 years, but even particularly that first year was transformative for me because I had to transform. I had to become a person that I wasn't. Fortunately, that's one thing I liked. And I did have this insight at some point, probably in grad school. I remember looking around at my classmates at Duke and thinking, oh my God, I'm never going to be as good in finance as this guy, ops as that woman, this marketing as that person. All these people are way better than me. What do you do if you love all of them, but you're not great at any of them? Oh, that's the manager.
That's right.
That's how I realized, I want that. It wasn't like power or anything. It's like, I think I can probably do that. And then I also realized, well, wait a second, like these big corporations, IBM, Coca-Cola, wherever, you get on this program and then you rotate around and then you're doing this. It's like 20 years until you're really running a business. And then it's not really a business because the back office does accounting and the legal department does legal. The place where in big corporations where you really get to run it standalone, true business is international. And so I set my sights on that. That's one of the reasons I went to International Paper. So when I got that opportunity, it was amazing because it's a standalone legal entity. It's actually a joint venture. International Paper owned 80%. Some local families owned the rest. It's got legal and employment and country representation. I need to know the ambassador and I need to know the trucking company. And I got to deliver dividends at the end of the year, come high or high water. I got to report to a board of directors. So I learned a ton and mainly about myself. I believe the most powerful journey, and really in many ways, the only journey we're on is learning about ourselves. And so I learned where my strengths are, where my challenges are, what I'm good at, where I get, running the fear, and so that process was one of the most powerful of my life. And I almost failed. Like it was, I had a couple times where I thought, man, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if they're going to let me keep doing this. But I did, and I wound up doing a really good job there.
And that became the
Yeah,
foundation for what came
that
next. Can you
absolutely.
talk to us about,
Yeah,
ZICO and where the idea came from and how that all came
yeah.
together?
No, you're right, Larry. That was the seminal sort of professional development opportunity for me for sure. Fast forward 5 years later, now I've been, yeah, or 4 years later, maybe 6 years with International Paper. I'm now beginning to think, okay, El Salvador is like, we've been there for 5 years. Like, it's time for a change. It's a small country. It's great, but we want to do more than just this. And so, I started talking to the company. I was getting, internal development conversations about next jobs, and a couple came up. One was to move to Brazil. Another was to move to Europe and do actually an HR role, but for run human resources talent for $1 billion business there. The other one was they wanted me to be the global manager for tobacco packaging business. And I said, yeah, you guys don't know me that well. That one's not happening. And I started to realize, like, oh man, I love this company. They've done great things for me, but they're headquartered in Memphis. I loved Memphis. We loved Memphis. It's not where we wanted to be forever. So it was hard to imagine, oh, if I stay with this company, I'm moving around, great career, but then I wind back in Memphis. And at the end of the day, it's paper and packaging. Like I love my job, I love the company, but that's not exciting me that much. So I started to realize I think I got to go find another job. And I got into fear, like, oh God, how do I get a job? What am I going to do? I'm the job I'm probably best suited for means I live in Miami and I travel 150 days a year, running some business in Latin America. I don't really want to do that. And I started to wonder, and it was actually out of fear, like, man, I think I need to start something. I just think I need to start something. And it wasn't like an excitement at first. It was fear, but that's okay. Fear can be a beautiful motivator, right? A beautiful
And
motivator.
it also came from understanding who you were as
Yes.
a person,
That took
which is huge.
that took time to emerge, but yes, and I will tell you that looking back, I had until that time, I had no interest in entrepreneurship. I thought it was weird. Like I didn't get it. I remember in grad school, people that were doing that were a little bit on the odd, side of things. It just didn't make sense to me. But in Latin America, I started to meet some family businesses. I started to provide some, work with some family businesses, entrepreneurs. And by now, I'm in my early 30s, probably. So I'm meeting enough people and seeing enough different experiences that I'm starting to think, oh, there's something out there. And I'll give you one little example too. I'll never forget International Paper acquired a small packaging business, and that the person that ran that business, it's a family business, was going to be peers with my boss. And I remember my boss telling me, oh, Mark, it was his name. Oh, he's not going to show up at our next offsite because he just made a pile of money. He's going to be skiing out at his place in Vail. And I remember thinking, uh, I like that. I like that scenario. What's that? What's
Yeah,
that scenario?
yeah,
So I started to get
yeah.
interested, and then I this is where I think my ADHD helped me develop one skill. I am really I'm a planner, and so I started to lay out, okay, if I'm going to do this, what criteria do I want to use? What is a good idea? Is it, about the size of the market, the margin opportunity, but it's also about what I want, what excites me, what I think I'll be interested in for a decade or two, something my girls might think is interesting years from now. So I actually developed a set of screens that then when I would have ideas, I would run them through the screens and could sort of rank them and compare them. So I had a ton of ideas, but coconut water was on the list because I'd first discovered it in Costa Rica as a Peace Corps volunteer, just drank it like everybody else. But then when I was in the beverage industry, I'm reading the beverage magazines. Remember, vitamin water was taken off in maybe 2003. And I remember thinking like, okay, great branding, interesting, but it's not that healthy. Meanwhile, I'm drinking coconut water all the time, having it for, after a workout as a, hangover cure, just as a great beverage. I was super active and I'd gotten off of Gatorade years ago. And I had learned about the electrolyte properties over the years and just realized, wait a second. What if we could position coconut water as sort of a next generation all natural sports drink? And that got me excited, like, okay, that could be big. That's exciting, fits with my lifestyle. And that began the process.
I love how you're bringing us right through the brainstorming process, because that's something that we often don't get that little window into seeing. So you're telling me essentially in our audience that it wasn't really a eureka moment. This is something that you were planning on and working on and striving towards. And you're doing this while you're still an international paper, correct?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
we talk about courageousness with entrepreneurship, and like at a certain point, you had to take that leap of faith. What was that decision-making process like, and when did that happen?
Oh man, yeah, great question. Let's see. At that point, I would have been when I started. When I quit, I would have been 35.
You remember the day?
No, good
Okay.
question. I'm sure.
All right.
I'm sure I could find it, and it was kind of a series of moves, telling different people. But I do remember. Flying up to the headquarters in Memphis, and I met with my boss. I think actually that's when he told me. I told him I was leaving, and he said, "Are you kidding me? I was just about to put your name in for the global head of tobacco." And I said, "Yeah."
Perfect.
Yeah.
Have you met me before?
I met the head. Yeah, I met the head of HR, and as a debrief, she wanted to know what was going on and da da da. And so I told her what was happening, and she said, what did she say? Something like, "I'd love to tell you that we could compete, like we could offer you so much potential, because you do have a lot of potential here, but something tells me it's not going to matter." And I said, "Yeah, you're right. I've made my decision." So that was a process, right? I have a high tolerance for risk. I have a little bit of a leap before you look approach.
Ready, fire, aim type
My
stuff.
my Yeah, exactly. My ex-wife Moore was still very amicably separated. She did not, and she's very rational, very adventurous, but she had some legitimate concerns and cautions, like, yeah, we have two little babies. Like, what are we gonna do? How do we take care of insurance and stuff like that? She's from New York, and I had concluded I wanted to move to New York to launch the business, and she's like, "Look, I got out of there for a reason. Like, I'll go back for you, but like it's going to be for a window of opportunity, right?" So it took a while. It was a process, but at some point, and I actually launched the business before I think I quit, gave notice, but then it was like a 3-month period of time, because I had a pretty big job and it took some time to manage the transition. So there was sort of a 3-month window until we moved. So I think we launched I probably gave notice. In fact, I'm certain I can find the date. I gave notice after a first trade show. That would have been fancy food 2004, probably June or something like that,
in New York.
in New York at the
I feel like I might
Javits.
have actually been there then.
Yeah.
No kidding. I think I was actually
You're
there.
the one.
Why?
And I remember,
Why were you
I
there?
remember, and I remember the response was so good. People didn't know what the hell it was, but we had a beautiful booth, beautiful branding. No one knew what it was, but there was so much excitement about something new here that I realized, okay, this is it. So I think I may have flown from there to Memphis and given notice. But then it took 3 months until I don't think we moved until probably September or October. And I can bring you up to speed on the whole thing, but we were bankrupt by December.
Really?
Wow.
So my next question was going to be, so what was year one ZICO like?
Year one ZICO was like, I'll give you one little glimpse. Probably, yeah, definitely within a year, we had realized can't afford New York, can't afford Westchester, where my wife was from. So we got to go to Jersey, which my wife is not, uppity or anything, but you get in New Yorkers.
Relax. I live in New
Nobody wants
Jersey.
to go to Jersey. Nobody.
So we're in a nice little house in New Jersey, and it's late at night. I'm in our garage taping boxes of ZICO for Amazon to pick up the next day, or for FedEx to pick up the next day, or UPS to ship to yoga studios around the country. And my wife comes out, and I can't remember. She didn't even have to say it. I know she's thinking, wait. A year ago, you're managing 300 people. You're traveling business class. We're renting beautiful houses anywhere we go. We've got more money than we know we can spend. And now you're taping boxes in the garage, and we're not sure how we're going to pay our mortgage this month. Like, what happened?
Where did the name come from? I'm curious.
My sister is an architect, and she was involved. She did the original branding for us, and she and I set criteria. I want it to be short, memorable, non-offensive in the nine major world languages, and have either in it, something referenced either coconut or health and wellness. So she and I developed a spreadsheet of every possible combination of 3 to 5 letters, right? Pre-AI or something, just manually. And then sort of went through process of elimination. Oh, and could it be registered? Could we get a URL or a trademark or something like that? And so there were, and ZICO just sort of stuck. Short, memorable, we could trademark it, and had co in it for coconut, and it just sort of took on a life of its own.
So talk to us. I'm now imagining you in the garage, wrapping boxes, taping things up, sending them out. But even getting to that point must have been incredibly hard. How do you get started?
Yeah.
You've got the name, you've got the product. How do you start to get it into the marketplace and begin to scale your business?
Yeah, when I look back, one thing I did really well, I think I was aware of what I didn't know, and I was aware of myself enough to know where I had some big blind spots. And so I knew quite a bit about the supply chain because I was a provider to the beverage industry. So I knew packaging, I knew processing, I knew equipment. I didn't know anything about coconuts, but I knew a piece of the business. I knew nothing about the brand building, the go-to-market strategy. So I studied. I remember researching. I researched every major beverage brand that had launched in the previous 20 years. Red Bull, Monster, Honest, no, this would have been pre-Honest Tea, Snapple, Vitamin Water, all those brands. I read everything I could to understand how did they go to market? How did this industry work? One thing I wish I'd done more of is really find some experts. I found a few, but I really just kind of did what people might call desktop research, right? Just what can I learn about this industry? And that was hugely helpful. And where I did leverage my network is I had a really good network of advisors and consultants we used for international paper, because we also not just sold the packaging, we sold all the equipment as well. So I hired a guy that I knew to help me develop a supply chain model, and including potentially building our own facility, but then also looking around the world. Okay, where do they grow coconuts? Who is doing what, where? And we found some people in Brazil. So I went through that whole process. And then I can, sort of concluded, all right, you start in one market. Like that seems to be the conclusion of all of this research. I was cautious. Frank, in fact, I think I was cautious and confused. Like, okay, there's these distributors go to specialty stores like Fairway or D'Agostino's. These distributors go to convenience stores. These distributors go to Walmart. Like, how do you do this? So I decided, you know what? I'm going to get a van and hire a couple guys, and we're going to start selling out of the van, and we're going to figure it out.
Wow.
Figure it out.
Do you remember your first sale? Do you remember the first person to hand money over?
We did, in fact, before we even were selling, we did a trial run of product with a couple flavors and stickered a label on. We brought it to New York. Maybe it was one pallet load. We had to ship in from Brazil at a fortune. And then I hired a small team to go out into the market and basically sample and demo. And we identified, I don't know, 10 different segments. Okay, we want to check out the Latino community. We want to check out the Asian community. We want to go after athletes, runners, basketball, dancers, natural food consumers, college students, and yoga studios. We tried all of them. Just, get a cooler, go out, sample, hey, yoga studio, you want to try some of this? Hey, at the end of a basketball game, try some of this. And kind of gathered all that feedback. And it was very mixed. Generally speaking, Latino community said, well, wait, this is supposed to be in a can. It's supposed to be 99 cents. It's not sweet enough, right? Okay, well, that's going to be a challenge for what we wanted to do. But the place where it really stuck was these yoga studios. Hot yoga, Bikram yoga at the time was just taking off. And what I realized is, oh God, it makes sense. It's active, 90 minutes, 108 degrees, right? And 26 positions or whatever it is. It's active. It's predominantly women. They're, of a certain means, they've got a certain amount of disposable income. A lot of them are probably travelers, right? They're traveling to Latin America. They're eating at Thai restaurants. They're going to natural food stores, and they are obsessed about health and wellness. And at the time, the yoga studios had vitamin water and smart water. Smart water during class and vitamin water after class. And I realized, there's no question we can convince people to drink this funky coconut water versus vitamin water in these yoga studios. So I remember the first yoga studios, I'm not even sure I met them that first day. Somebody else that I hired had, but then I met them soon after. But the feedback I got is these yoga studios want to buy it now. Like they want whatever we have. And I'm like, it's not even allowed to sell. Like it's not marked to sell. Just give it to them. And so all of them, like, then I met some of the owners and they're like, we want this. So as soon as you bring it in, we'll take it. And those were our first customers.
All right. So when did ZICO, I don't want to say, I guess on a large scale break through? Like what was that breakthrough moment?
Look, I wish I could tell you there was one, it was a
process, right?
Slow
process
growing.
of it.
Yeah, it was a process. It was probably 4 years and a lot of pain, a lot of difficulty. But I think the thing that helped us was, life and business and entrepreneurship is a momentum game. And momentum you see in concentration, right? It's hard to see momentum spread across, too many data points. And so one thing we did good early on, I got some interest and sold some product elsewhere, but it never worked out well in terms of repeat sales. So I coined a term, New Jersey's international. We sell in New York. That's it. And it's New York City. And even then, we were really selling in and around these 15 yoga studios from Upper East Side, Upper West Side, Brooklyn Heights, you can imagine the spots. So, but given we were so concentrated, it started to like click. And so, and what I remember, and that was both our sales, but by this point we had a major distributor in New York. There's a big distributor in New York called Big Geyser. They're independent. They've put a ton of brands on the market. Nantucket Nectars back in the day, Vitamin Water, Smart Water, Muscle Milk. They took on ZICO. And I remember some of their distributors, because they're all at the time they were these little independent distributors running, one route on a couple of streets. And all of a sudden, I remember the first one took a pallet, 200 and something cases to put on his truck.
Wow.
And I'm like, okay, this is now happening. And I remember soon after that, Coke had bought Vitamin Water. I forget what year, maybe 2007 or something like that, for like 4.2 billion. They were public. They never wanted that to have to happen again. So they formed this new group called Ventures and Emerging Brands to kind of get brands early. And I met somebody from that group. They were in New York checking out brands. They went to Big Geyser to see what's kind of trending there. And the guy told me, he said, Mark, you're not going to believe this. We did nationwide research of trends, not just beverages, overall trends. And ZICO showed up, not coconut water, ZICO. And he said,
Wow.
can you believe that? And I said, yeah. And he said, why? Why would you believe that? And I said, well, let me guess. You targeted, New York, LA, Miami, Boston, and those cities. Yep. Okay. You targeted, sort of 25 to 35-year-olds. Yep. You targeted people that were in the health and wellness and probably shop at Whole Foods. They're probably runners or cyclists. You probably included some yogis because that's trending right now. Yep. So that's our audience. So we targeted them for the same reason you are targeting them as trend makers, because I wanted you to conclude to find us this way.
Wow, brilliant. Was your intention always to sell?
It was, and to sell to Coca-Cola, for better or worse, from the beginning. Very first, strategy document or vision document, I wanted to sell to Coca-Cola. And the conclusion, the logic was very simple. I don't want to run this forever. I don't want to pass it down to my kids. And I want to scale it to a point, sell it to them, and let them make billions selling something healthy. That was the audacity to think I could actually change the Coca-Cola company.
That's pretty cool.
And you did
Yeah,
it.
you did it. Really.
Not a bit. Not a bit. We'll come back to that, but not
Yeah, right. Sort of, right. So you obviously we want to know all about this process. We're going to run out of time here eventually, but I mean, what are the negotiations like? What did you like talk about when you knew it was imminent?
Yeah.
Did you feel good about it? What was that like? Were you 1,000% involved? Did you bring in people to help with the sale? How did that work?
Yeah, it was an interesting process. So this was a unique process. It happens sometimes, but I was clear. We were still really small. We were, I don't know, we were less than 20 million in revenue. So we were very small. I knew it was early, but I also knew, man, these things don't come along too often. There's only one Coca-Cola and one PepsiCo. And they also were interested in sort of invest early and have a path to ownership and help along the way. And I was naive enough to think, oh, great, they're going to be so helpful. It's going to be great. So conceptually, what we aligned on was a multi-step process where they would make an initial investment, we'd get the capital we need to grow. Then we would start to figure out where they could be helpful, and then eventually they would have an option to buy it. I pretty much negotiated that deal myself, and I did have a great lawyer, but I didn't have an investment banker and the lawyer wasn't doing the negotiation. And I remember, and there was a third party involved as well. There's a guy, New York guy named Jesse Itzler, who founder of Marquis Jet. And so he was trying to start his own coconut water. He was talking to Coke as well. So I wound up structuring a three-way deal. And, two-way deals are tough enough. Three-way deals are typically impossible. I think what helped was I sort of set the stage like, look, here's the minimum it's got to be. Here's the kind of structure it's got to be. So it took me kind of carving a path and then allowing that all to structure. Now, this is where I will acknowledge, like, look, I think having an MBA, having worked at IP, having international paper, having done all I'd done, I had what probably most entrepreneurs don't have. And I'll tell you, in hindsight, I wish I had a partner at my side. I do. Wish I had either a bank or a private equity firm or a growth equity partner, because I think I could have got a lot better deal,
I'm curious, when you structured that first deal and you took the money in and you set up the milestones, did you negotiate a price that you were going to sell for then, or did you leave it open-ended to figure out later on?
And we did a multiple. So the price wasn't fixed, but the multiple of revenue was. Okay. So the good news is it was a multiple of revenue. The bad news was it declined over time. And their argument, typically now I'm on the other side of this, multiples usually go up. The bigger the business, the more it's worth on a multiple basis. But usually it's not a multiple of revenue, it's a multiple of profit or EBITDA, right? But so it was, and their logic was, look, we're going to help a lot. We're not going to pay extra for helping to build it, right? So it was a structure that worked. At the time, I looked at this and said, well, God, this is more money than I ever thought I'd make or anybody in my family's ever made. Now I look back and say, wow, I should have structured that completely differently, but whatever. I'm not, no wrong choices, right? Maybe that was the best thing that ever happened to me,
So I'm curious about the other side. Yeah. So you get the deal done, you now have more money than I'm sure you've ever imagined having in your life. You've caught the car, so to speak.
Yeah.
Then what? Like, what are you feeling? What are you thinking? How do you process?
You answer that question, how much did you sell for?
Well,
if you don't mind me asking.
First of all, no. This was a multi-step. So the part I'm talking about was an initial investment, right? Then they had the option to buy. That took another couple of years. So 2013, they did buy the whole company, and we sold it for a little over $200 million.
Man, oh man.
And so this is interesting as well from sort of a career standpoint. I didn't want to work for them. I respect them enormously. I've got a lot of great friends that are there. I had enough of 5 years of dealing with them. So I structured it so I was out day one. And that I didn't expect to happen really. So it was a delight. So in many ways, it was amazing. I've got money in the bank. I've got, sold the company. We're building a beautiful house on the beach. And I'm, how old am I then? 43 or so, and if I'm not an idiot, I don't ever have to work again.
Of course.
Right.
Even if you were an idiot, I don't think you'd ever have to worry about working again.
I've learned.
There you go.
You know the stories.
This
is no joke. You know how many athletes,
right?
How many? I know people that have blown through. I know people that have blown through many, many tens of millions of dollars. I don't know people that have blown through hundreds, but I know they're out there. Hundreds, right? So, and I honestly, I can look back and see, I can close. There's a non-zero scenario where I'm broke because I was not prepared. I hadn't done a lot of the inner sort of emotional work. And so the first couple of years were amazing. I'm taking time, I'm surfing, I'm traveling, I'm partying, we're renting houses, everything's great, But then little by little, I think I felt like, oh wow, now people are interested in my advice. They want my help. Well, they also want my money. So I started investing in businesses and not a lot of discipline or process or methodology. So very quickly, I wound up investing in 40 companies and not small investments,
Wow.
not small. And so, six figures and a couple even bigger. And I realized a couple of years later, like also, I'm frankly drinking a ton. I'm working my ass off. My investments are all over the place. My marriage is falling apart. My health is not great. I kind of wake up one day and realize, wait, this is success? Like, what happened? And so that began a whole life transformation for me. That took about 7 years, but that's it wasn't all. It was beautiful, it was wonderful, but it was definitely not all that I had thought that the myth would deliver me. This fantasy would deliver for me.
Yeah, and this is a lot of what the genesis of the book is right?
It is.
Learning these very valuable and difficult lessons. Just
Yeah.
before we move on to some other stuff, can you put the bow on ZICO? When did
Yeah.
you go back and reacquire them,
Yeah.
and why did you do that?
Yep. So 2013 sold it all, and then became an angel investor, then started our first funds under the name of Power Plant Partners, then raised a bigger fund under Ground Fourth Capital. But along the way, I think we were at the tail end of our second fund. I now have, institutional investment firm. I've got partners and a team. We're looking at investments. We're looking at growth stage investments. And I get a call from someone in Coca-Cola that's basically giving me a heads up that the following morning there's going to be a Wall Street Journal article. This was 2010. No, 2020, post-COVID. Wall Street Journal article is going to leak. Coke is selling off or shutting down 200 brands globally, and ZICO's among them. So they decided to focus on their core. A lot of big strategics did this post-COVID. Forget all this little stuff, just sell Coke. And so they were going to sell off ZICO. And so I talked to my business partner, Dan, and said, man, should we make a run at buying this thing back? And so we put together a thesis and a team and bought the brand and the brand only, meaning we didn't buy an ongoing business, and then put a team in place and started to build back the business. And that's been since 2020. So we're 5 years in, and it's taken longer. It's been harder. It's taken more money than we expected, but by next year, it should be bigger than it was when I sold it to Coke the first time. And I can tell you one big difference. I don't love this, admitting this, but I can own it. Once Coke made a minority investment, the game was on and it was built to sell. Now it's built to last. It's built to last forever. Maybe somebody buys it, but it's built forever.
And you took your baby back.
I took my baby back. I've got 2 daughters.
There you go.
And little ZICO, he was a rambunctious little guy. I was happy to get him out of the house. But you know what? He came back.
I love it. I'd be remiss if we didn't ask this question before this interview ended, because you talk about it so much in your book, and I took so much out of it. Can someone without discipline achieve these things at the highest level?
Oh, God. I haven't seen it. Like, I used to believe, I think whether it was a true belief or just this sort of unconscious myth, if I make enough money, then I could do whatever the hell I want, whenever I want. I don't have to be disciplined. I don't have to. I know the lazy one in me. I know the one that wants to, the prior me, have champagne in the morning, work out, do what I want to do, have a glass of wine at lunch, and just do whatever the hell I want to do. I don't even have to worry about managing my money. Like it just flows in, right? And I realized, it doesn't quite work that way, at least not for me. And very few people I know, very few. And I've learned that's been a painful lesson. Like when I look back on my early personal investing track record, it's not great. Fortunately, I had a couple big wins, but like I got way over my skis. I got way over, and I hear this story all the time from entrepreneurs. When I share this, I have people come up to me or call me up and say, "Oh my God, me too, me too." It takes discipline, and that there's a way to build it, and I go into that in my book. But no, I don't think that's possible.
Let's talk about the book. So we've all, poured through it. We've all been inspired by it. We could all frame it in our own way, but nobody could frame the story and frame the key message better than you. How would you tell the world, just tell us, to set up the story for us?
I would say that the way I like to set this up is I, like many entrepreneurs, believe the myth. Have a great idea, work really hard, scale your business, make a lot of money, then you'll be successful and free. And it's a beautiful myth, but it's a myth. And in my journey, I realized I technically won. I did that and sold the business and had the success. But over time, I started to realize I didn't really feel free. I felt trapped by the same emotions and limiting beliefs and more desire for more and the next car to chase, as you said, right? And I see this all the time with entrepreneurs. And whether it's millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions, or billions, it is absolutely no guarantee of freedom. And that's for the successful ones. And then you have the 90% plus of entrepreneurs that are either quote unquote fail or somewhere in the middle. And what kind of setup is it? Like what? They can never be free, right? Ever.
Right.
So when I started to realize that, I started to question, God, is there a different way? What if I started with freedom first? Start with the end in mind, we're told, right? Okay, this is what I want. This is what I'm going to start with. What would that look like? And could it, in fact, deliver even better results in business? Could I still be active and competitive and driven in business? And what I found is, in fact, yeah. And in fact, I started to realize myself, and after talking, working with hundreds of entrepreneurs, there's this gap in our like mental programming and software that traps us in this ideal way to be an entrepreneur, to be successful, to be a man, to be a person that is so ingrained in us that we just follow it. Little things like there's no place for emotions in business, right? That to be successful, you have to do but, versus let's talk about Larry, what Larry needs to do. How does Larry build his life? How does Mark build his life? They may be completely different, right? And so I went on my own journey to say, how do I break free of all this prior beliefs and myths I had to chart the life I want? And I learn by writing. That's how I carve. I'm not as great learning by reading, believe it or not. We talked about experience, but I do work things out by writing. So I came up with my own system. I sort of hacked my own operating system, picked up some tools and techniques from, and worked with a ton of world-class coaches, therapists, neuroscientists, psychoanalysts, spiritual teachers and guides, and then consulting and working with hundreds of entrepreneurs, came up with this methodology that works for me. I started using it in my business with my partner and my team and started getting feedback like, wow, this is amazing. And what has happened? What are you drinking? Like what shifted?
Coconut water.
What is in that coconut water?
I decided, you know what? I'm going to share this. If it resonates with anyone, amazing. But at least for me, I wanted to your point, put a bow on like this chapter of my life as I prepare for the back half of my life.
Well, I will share that it's been, very helpful to me. I'll share. I sold a company,
Mm,
6+ years
mm,
ago, and I went through part of what you went through,
mm,
and I caught the car and I came out the other side. And I have personally been going through this process of, okay, now that I'm safe, now that I'm no longer driven by fear or all those other things that were driving me for so long. It's like, okay, now what? And to your point, I thought that freedom was going to be right in front of my face on the other side. And you take a deep breath, you take a step back. But if you're wired in a particular way and you're used to striving and driving and doing all those different things, it's impossible to shut it off. And there's this discovery process that you go through and that I have gone through to figure out, what creates meaning on the other side. So sitting down, reading your book, it's like, oh yeah, that's me. That's
wow,
me. Like
beautiful.
it so resonated. So I thank you for putting everything that it's been in my head
Ah,
on paper.
you're welcome, Larry. I appreciate hearing that. Look, you said a couple things that I think are so powerful. One is meaning. I do think that's a powerful concept that gets lost, the distinction between success and meaning. And the other thing I'll say is, you said it's impossible, but yet you're finding your own possibility to rewire, right?
Yep.
And the other thing I'd say is I hear from a lot of younger entrepreneurs or people that are kind of in the weeds. Oh, look, that sounds great, but like I don't have time for that. Maybe later. That's great for him or Larry because they sold their businesses. I'm in the grind, right? I am telling you, the applications for this, it is designed and built for people in the weeds because it is a trap to always push this stuff off. And
For
I
sure.
offer some really specific tools and skills. People talk about like there's three things you need for success: a mindset, skill set, and tool sets. And the concept is, well, skills and tools are your business and your training and your industry and whatever. Just have the right mindset. Well, how? Right? I
Yep.
get into the how. What are the little tricks and hacks one can use immediately today? You don't have to study. They're just really simple little things that can help you feel more at peace, more free in the moment. And that actually leads to better results.
All right, so I'm going to go kind of back to my initial question to you that we started, but I want to ask one thing: is that so your book, which is called An Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom, is it really for entrepreneurs? Because I mean, I've seen so many of your own little sayings, like consistency is the refuge of fools, right? That is something I've
Mm,
used
yeah,
myself as a show producer,
yeah,
right? I hate being
yeah,
consistent when it comes to
yeah,
doing shows. Just roll
yeah,
out of bed, get yourself up and going,
yeah,
things of that nature.
yeah,
Emotions are teachers. This is very much
yeah,
like what I use in my own daily life, in my own career.
Life
Yeah, these
lessons.
are great
Yeah.
yeah,
life lessons. So I'll go back to my initial question. Are you a life coach, or are you someone
yeah.
who is someone who just is giving advice to entrepreneurs?
What am I to you? Right? I mean, I say that facetiously, but like, look, I I know this isn't just for entrepreneurs at all. I was very thoughtful, or I think I was, in you know this is the audience I know. This is the crowd I know. In many ways, I think this is the audience that needs it the most. 80+% of entrepreneurs will have a mental health crisis in their journey,
80% of
two to
producers
four
will have a
times.
mental health crisis in their
Right.
journey.
So it's not only for entrepreneurs at all. I chose to be specific to kind of, get through, but my hope is and belief is that it can speak to anyone. And I feel like I would be excited about doing this work anywhere with anyone. I just happen to work with entrepreneurs. That's where I am. That's what I do right now. And so why not them? Why not them?
As we close things out, a young person, MBA, whoever they are, who has an idea, a young entrepreneur, what advice do you have for somebody who's just getting started?
Mm. Yeah, there's probably one little tool I would offer them, which is ask yourself in pretty much any situation, what's the story you're telling yourself? What's that story? Could be a fantasy, could be a negative talk track, could be whatever it is. Write it down. This business is going to be huge. Oh, I'm not good enough to really do this. Whatever they are, write it down. And then ask yourself a couple questions. Am I certain? Am I 100% certain it's true? What if the opposite were true? Can you allow for that possibility? And just that little gap between not always believing what we think, not always believing the story we tell ourselves, is the beginning of a breakthrough that I think is both one of the most powerful ways for freedom, but it's the most powerful way for entrepreneurship too, which is we tell ourselves these stories all the time. And if we can catch ourselves and reframe them, we've got a better chance of sitting in possibility and finding the best outcome.
Great advice. Great advice.
Incredible advice. Mark, we're so thankful you joined us. Everybody out there, get the book, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom. It is absolutely fantastic. Mark, thank you so much for joining us.
You're
today.
welcome, fellas. Thank you. I really, really enjoyed this. Fantastic questions, and I understand now the gift you bring. So thank you.
We appreciate that. We greatly appreciate
Thank
that.
you for that.
Oh, and for those of you who are watching the video, look in the background of Larry Samuel's little man cave right there. It is on the chair.
It's on the chair.
There you go.
Noticed. Good placement.
It is really in process.
Better than
Thank
me,
you.
Larry. I should like
There.
have it right here.
There you go.
I should have
There you go.
this.
Drink the ZICO. Yes.
Ooh, love it. Love it.
All right, guys.
That might be that photo might be what we use
right
for the
there. That's
episode.
the
Right
thumbnail.
there.
I'm
That's
all
the thumbnail.
sweaty. Go for it.
That concludes our two-part conversation with Mark Rampolla. We typically run one, and we usually try to keep them somewhat tight and organized, but this conversation was just so darn interesting. It was impossible to do that. This was just such a fascinating discussion. Larry Shea, what are some of your takeaways?
Yeah, first of all, truly inspiring story. I mean, yeah, you're just so uplifted, like hearing his story and reading about his story. And I just want everybody to listen to both these episodes again and take notes, because he literally gave you a front row seat to, how to take an idea and bring it to fruition. And that is just invaluable. So listen again. We love the listens.
Yeah.
And take notes. But yeah, he talked about so many interesting things. I feel like working in international paper really set him up to conquer all of the obstacles that he was going to face when he started his own company. So, your experiences lead you to another experience, leads you to success. And I think that's super important. He said it was out of fear that he started ZICO, right? Like, what a motivating factor fear can be.
Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that he had no idea what that big idea was going to be. He knew he wanted to do something big, but he had no idea it was going to be coconut water and ZICO. So that's pretty interesting. And his advice at the end, what's your story? What story are you telling? And then write it down. And then ask yourself, am I certain? What if the opposite were true? I mean, I love his analytical approach to conquering obstacles. It just makes so much sense to me, and I'm truly inspired by the story.
Well, for me, Shay, it's kind of similar in many of the ways that we look at our conversations we've had in the past with folks, and the notion of no wrong choices. And in this case, it's the path that is not the traditional path to success. And I think in a lot of ways, that is the real story here. It's not so much that, he had an idea, he had a job, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was that even in his early schooling, it was unconventional, right? He goes to the Peace Corps. He comes back to get an MBA. The people there look at him and are like, well, why are you doing this? You went to the Peace Corps. You want to get a business degree. I think some of that story to me is inspiring, because in a lot of ways, it does motivate you to kind of prove people wrong. And at the same time, you have so much more of a fuller background than those people who you would say are there on the traditional path, right? They go from high school to college, do all the business degree stuff in college, then go on to business school, but with no real practical world and work experience. Here is a man who went to overseas, got to see parts of the world, was able to formulate ideas about what can I do next, and then bring those into the business world with him. And it made him a richer candidate, not only for his MBA, but obviously for what he was going to contribute in the future as well. To me, this conversation is not simply about having the plan. Fear is a motivator, dreaming big, but it's also the notion of, not every path has to be the same way. And I think that's been an overriding arc in all of the guests that we speak about, is that the path is not the same for everyone. There is no wrong choice a lot of the times. And everything that we do on that pathway to success will add tools to the toolbox.
For sure. And I feel like normally I'm the business guy and the analytical one, and not necessarily the softy, so to speak.
Yeah.
But this conversation, I found it fascinating for personal reasons to a certain degree, because there are some commonalities between our stories in terms of, running a company, selling a company, dealing with ADHD. It's something that I discovered in my late 40s, similar to him. And it was quite the revelation to look back at my journey and the things that I did and gravitated towards, and the strengths and weaknesses and everything else. And he went through the same thing. It was sort of helpful to me, because he wrote down on paper a lot of the things that, I had experienced personally and thought about. And not a lot of people have gone through a self-discovery process in the way that Mark has, and found a way to really understand himself and get to know himself, and to leverage that, if that's the appropriate word in this situation, for the future, and to really put things back together in a way that make a lot of sense and provide meaning, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it was just such an incredible story that connected with me on so many different levels. He's such a fascinating guy. And for everybody out there, I highly recommend that you read his book, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom. We've all poured through it. It's fantastic. I learned so much. Tushar and Larry did too. I strongly recommend that you check this out.
Is it still in the background on the couch?
It is not. Well, you know
there
what?
It is.
It is.
There it is.
Actually is behind
That's
me right
how important
now.
it is. So important it remains in the background.
So that is the perfect sell piece right there. Pick up the book, An Entrepreneur's Guide to Freedom. Mark, thank you so much for joining us. This has been such a fantastic conversation. We also thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed our conversation, please support No Wrong Choices by following us wherever you're listening right now. You can also join our growing community by connecting with us on LinkedIn, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, or by visiting NoWrongChoices.com for great additional content. On behalf of Larry Shea, Tushar Saxena, and me, Larry Samuels, thank you again for joining us.